Welcome to the Standing Committee meeting for the Standing Committee on Cultural Affairs, Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sport. I'm Wasim Matthews. I am the procedural officer for the committee. Following the changes to the committee's membership, a new committee chairperson needs to be elected. These changes are reflected in ATC number 60 of 2022. To all guests and officials, please allow the committee to first select its chairperson so that we may proceed with the business of the day. In terms of Standing Rule 82.1, which reads, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament in terms of the Western Cape Provincial Standing Committee's Standing Rule 81.2, a committee must elect a chairperson from its membership. On the basis of that rule, I will now take nominations. Please use the raise hand function, and if you are unable, you may just alert me. Thank you. I'll now take nominations. I note Member Bartman and Member Mackenzie. Member Bartman.
Thank you so much. I would like to propose Member Gillian Bosman.
Noted. Member Mackenzie, you had your hand raised.
It's fine. As Member Bartman has, see Member Plato is here to nominate because I'm the alternate.
Okay. Are there any further nominations? None so. Member Bosman, if you accept the nomination, then you are now the chairperson of the Standing Committee. I hand over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews, and it's very good to be back after a short break from community safety. And good morning to everybody. I trust you are all well and you're all staying warm. Like I said, a very warm welcome to this committee meeting of the Department of Community Safety and Police Oversight. I'd also like to welcome the Minister if he's here, as well as the Head of Department and all other colleagues joining us from the department, as well as members and colleagues joining us from the City of Cape Town. Colleagues, I'm now going to ask that members please introduce themselves just for the record.
Good morning, Chairperson. Congratulations. My name is Ferdinand Christians. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Deirdre Bartman. Congratulations, Chairperson.
Good morning, Ricardo Mackenzie. Congratulations, Chair.
Good morning, Dan Plato. Congratulations.
Good morning, Chairperson and members, Ms. Ulikama.
Good morning to all the members. Thank you very much for joining us. Can I now hand over to our colleagues from the department joining us and just ask if they can introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chairperson, and congratulations from the department side. I'm David Kutsi. I'm the acting HOD, and apologize, Yashina Pillay is on leave, so she could not join us for this engagement. And I'll hand over for the rest of the staff to introduce themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, Chair. Congratulations also from our side. I'm Wayne Butler. I'm the Acting Director for Safety Promotion and Partnerships.
Good morning, Mr. Butler, and good morning to Mr. Kutsia, the Acting HOD. Do we have any other colleagues joining us?
Good morning, Chair. I'm Razak. I'm the project coordinator reporting to Mr. Kutsia and Mr. Butler on the LEAP project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any colleagues joining us from the City of Cape Town?
Good morning, Chair. Director Roberts, Director for Operational Coordination.
Good morning, Director Roberts. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair. Deputy Chief Smith, Law Enforcement, LEAP, City of Cape Town.
Good morning. Are there any other colleagues or members that may have joined that haven't introduced themselves?
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Member Wendy Kaiser-Philander.
Good morning, Chairperson Rachel van Vogel.
Good morning. Such a lot of familiar voices that I haven't heard in such a long time. It fills my heart with joy to be back in this cluster.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Johan Brandt. I am from EDP and I'm supporting the Department of Community Safety with the LEAP project.
Good morning, Mr. Brandt, and welcome back in your new capacity. We remember you in your previous capacity. Colleagues, just a reminder that we are conducting meetings using the rules for virtual engagement. I'm going to ask that you please keep yourselves muted when you are not on the floor. And when you do speak, please feel free to switch your camera on. If you'd like to raise a point of order, please do so by either raising your hand or getting the attention of the chair to allow us just to have a smooth meeting. As you know, this meeting is being broadcast on YouTube, so members of the public are joining us as well. Like I said, my name is Gillian Bosman and I'm going to be chairing this committee meeting. And the order of proceedings for today will be that the Department of Community Safety and the City of Cape Town is going to jointly brief the committee on the Law Enforcement Advancement Plan. What we've asked the department to do is to present the criteria that the department uses to determine the funding allocation for LEAP, the legislative framework guiding the oversight and monitoring role that the department has over the use of this funding, as well as the collective funding allocated to LEAP since its inception, the projected number of financial years in which the funding will continue, the department's stance on extending the funding to similar programs in other provincial municipalities that are enabled with its own municipal policing or law enforcement structures, the scope of the department's role in determining the deployment of LEAP officers, as well as the areas in which those officers are deployed. And what we've asked the city to do is to determine the criteria that is used for funding, using the funding allocation given by DOCS for LEAP. Also to share with us the Directorate's mid or long-term plans to maintain the facilitation of LEAP, the criteria for LEAP officer deployment in specific areas within the metro, as well as the role and powers of LEAP officers vis-a-vis the role and powers of other municipal policing officers, be it in the Cape Town Metropolitan Police or law enforcement officers. And then also to share with us the scope of the jurisdiction of the duties in respect of policing, investigation, arrests, and crime intelligence of LEAP officers, and the relationship between municipal policing and law enforcement unit within the Provincial South African Police Service. So with that, I'm now going to then hand over to Mr. Kutsia, which I assume will do the presentation on behalf of the department.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Butler is going to do the presentation, but I'll just make some opening remarks. So, Chair, thank you. As you've indicated, that the department and city are going to present a progress on the LEAP implementation. To note that the LEAP is then based on a data and intelligence-driven project, and that is specific deployments. Various sources of data using hectares from the Department of Health, SAPS, Western Cape Liquor Authority, and even some community information is used then to identify hotspots where the deployment will be done. LEAP is then primarily also there to reduce murder, as in the safety plan. And then there's a priority focus on 10 murder priority stations. And then some expansions have also now been made in the LEAP program, which we will speak to. And then just in summary there's a total of 1,258 officers that are employed by the LEAP project, with actual deployment of 1,116, and then currently 87 that are on training. So Mr. Butler will now take us through the detailed presentation, And then we'll also then answer the questions then that the members may have on the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do I see a hand, Director Roberts?
Chair, if I can just come in after consultation with the Department of Community Safety and Mr. Johan Brandt, I see there was an overlapping with regarding to the questions in terms of finance, in terms of the operational approach, in terms of the legislative mandate, and that is we did not want to duplicate all the issues, and most of the input from the city will also be dealt with in the presentation from the Department of Community Safety.
Thank you. No, that's good. So we'll have one person doing the presentation and then colleagues will just come in with the question and answer session. Is my understanding correct?
That's correct, Chair.
That's correct, Chair.
Correct.
Perfect. So we may go ahead.
Good morning, honourable members and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present the presentation on the LEAP. We just start the show. So I'm just going to go through a brief background and overview. The origins of the safety priority, it initially started with a 5-year strategic plan from 2014 to 2019, where 5 provincial strategic goals were identified, with strategic goal 3 focusing on safety and decrease and wellness. Then in 2018, the Western Cape Safety Plan came to fruition, and that was just before the next 5-year period of a new provincial strategic plan on 2019 to 2024. And here it was reworked into vision-inspired priorities, 5 vision-inspired priorities, being safe and cohesive community as VIP1. This is the one that we focus on in the department, and that's looking at policing capacity and effectiveness, support to youth at risk and families at risk, and then social cohesion and public spaces. Then with COVID-19, the pandemic was devastating in terms of the economy, jobs, and also safety. So a recovery plan was developed, and this was prioritized looking at jobs, safety, and well-being. The safety aspect is focusing on improved policing and law enforcement, the safety social cluster, urban design. And then we use data and evidence, as Mr. Kusia has indicated, with the actors from Department of Health, and also looking at where these crimes take place. This then led to the design and development of the law enforcement advancement plan, which is focusing on policing capacity and effectiveness, increasing boots on the ground, and then also improved policing and law enforcement. And again, this is based on evidence and data. Just the background in terms of the actors model, where it comes from, it's based on the Cardiff model that requires a strategic use of cross-departmental information. This is basically hospital-based screenings about where, when, and how injuries happen, and that's linked with law enforcement reports, also looking at how, when, and where crime happened. And this anonymous information is then combined from all the resources to create a complete map and picture in terms of where in the province violence is occurring. And this shared information through partnership with communities can help provincial and local solutions to prevent injuries and violence from in the public spaces. So this is essentially an intergovernmental approach. The health data, it looks at road traffic incidents. It looks at forensic pathology services data, the safety dashboard that was recently launched, and then very importantly, the emergency medical services reports, and then also area-specific reports that has geocoded data shared with the Department of the Premier and the dashboard for mapping. Then just in terms of the summary of the Cardiff model, looking at how, when and where crime takes place, it's basically an interaction between the data and evidence from the forensic pathology services and the LEAP deployment. And it's continuously analyzed and monitored so that any impacts can be addressed and new interventions implemented. The criteria for funding them, the LEAP was implemented as a direct result of the safety plan from 2018. The Western Cape Safety Plan through the LEAP prioritizes the reduction of murder and therefore the areas with the highest homicide rates in the province as it has been prioritized. And as Mr. Kutsia alluded to previously, the safety plan is about reducing the murder rate by 50% by 2029. So based on the homicide reports, the Department of Health coagulated with the SAPS crime statistics, the stations with the highest murder rate that is mostly allocated in the city of Cape Town. So the homicide rates has been the main criteria for the allocation of law enforcement funding also during the MTF 3-year period. So the lead funding has been prioritized into those priority areas. The legislative framework guiding monitoring and oversight of the funding. The department's legislative framework is derived from the LEAP Gazette that is tabled annually. This Gazette sets out the monitoring requirements for the beneficiary institution and has an effective oversight and monitoring requirement for the department's funding. The Gazette is supported by a transfer payment agreement in accordance with the Public Finance Management Act and the Municipal Finance Management Act. Furthermore, the department initiated a Section 35 Intergovernmental Relations Governance and Protocol Agreement to further strengthen the effective financial and resource management government of the LEAP. The way in which the monitoring and oversight mechanism is implemented is just on the next page, next slide, where the department appointed a single manager as nodal point to ensure more streamlined, effective management of and reporting on the LEAP and improved communication between the role players. On the other hand, our partner in the city has appointed a new LEAP project manager during 2021 to streamline internal and external compliances and reporting thereon. A revised IGR governance framework was developed and implemented, and this includes multiple technical teams, progress reviews, and regular engagements between the parties involved. The LEAP manager is supported by operational and technical teams, and meetings are held regularly to ensure effective governance. For example, our quarterly executive and top management meetings, bi-weekly and monthly operational meetings, quarterly financial expenditure reports, a quarterly dashboard and data reporting engagement, and then also our training and recruitment reporting engagements. In terms of the governance framework, just a snapshot, it's a little bit detailed. I hope it's still visible. And that is looking at the strategic level of the framework is the Safety Cabinet, and the Safety Cabinet's responsibilities to provide overall agreement, overall leadership and direction, to demonstrate a shared vision, to resolve any disputes arising from new priorities, to forge greater synergy between departments, institutions and role players, and to maintain and champion principles of cooperative governance. At the tactical management level, it's the Safety Manco and LEAP accounting steercom that's responsible to establish a proper command structure, develop consensus on project objectives, and ensure the outcomes of the safety plan is met in terms of the LEAP business plan, developing agreements to motivate how resources are allocated, to agree on an institutional model that is aligned with the PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act, and the Municipal Finance Management Act, to develop and align performance targets to confirm or affirm project objectives and agreements, to review any deviations and address those, monitor consolidated operational plans, and to evaluate and assess consolidated reports on the operations. Then at the operational steercom level, that meets monthly and bi-weekly, the responsibilities is to establish a proper command structure, to develop an operational plan aligned to the available data, as we've indicated, the Cardiff model and the hectares, data-led and evidence-based, in terms of how, where, and when these crimes take place, to ensure operations are executed as planned, monitor and assess physical operations, to consolidate and report on operations and account to leadership platforms, and to escalate for strategic decisions to the accounting, steercom, and executive committee. Then there's 3 technical teams. The first technical team is focusing on finance, grant funding, compliance, and human resources. And the responsibilities of this team is to facilitate all performance and parliamentary reporting compliances, faculty business plan and gazette reporting compliances, to develop a transfer payment agreement compliance tools for reporting, to facilitate the LEAP transfer payment agreement quarterly in progress compliance assessments, and then to monitor and report on operational deployment in the focus areas. The second technical team is the dashboard data and M&E team, and they are responsible to formalize data sharing arrangements, to analyze the policing in operations, and to formalize serious violent crime and murder reduction indicators, analyzing and operationalizing consultations in alignment with operations, to facilitate the live dashboard on LEAP for accounting and political steercom, to also report on successes and the impact of the LEAP program on crime and murder reduction, to monitor and evaluate in accordance with the agreement, and to develop an automated dashboard system that links to the online LEAP portal. Then the third technical team is the peace officer recruitment and training team, with the responsibilities of facilitating recruitment for new and existing staff, also through staff that leave the system, and to recruit new staff and train them again and upskill, establish the green training plan for existing and new staff to ensure body of evidence of training and recruitment compliance, and have a database of that, to facilitate effective training, quality assurance, and then the facilitation of peace officer training in the rural areas, in the local municipalities, and this is done in partnership with the Chrysalis Academy and the Metro Training. The collective funding that has been allocated since inception, the gazetted amount for 2019-20 financial year was 130 million. Then for the 2021, it was 417 million. And the last financial year, it was 165.25 million. In terms of the total projected cost for 2019, it was just under 170 million. 2021, it was almost 558 million. And then 458 million for the last financial year. And this was the total cost of the co-funding model of the LEAP. So for the projected financial years that will continue the LEAP plan is for this financial year, the gazetted amount is 400 million. Then for the second year in the MTEF period next year, it's 350. And then the outer year, 2024-25, it's also 350 million. The existing funding to similar programs in the rural municipalities, as alluded to, and here the department's looking at establishing K9 units in districts, specifically with high crime in the rural areas. Also the establishment of reaction team to provide support. And then we are aiming to provide 300 training and internship opportunities for rural law enforcement or peace officers. And this is in partnership with the Metro Training College to increase the law enforcement standards. And as we've learned from LEAP and other training opportunities with municipalities, that in the rural areas, the standard was not the same as in the metro and we're going to upskill and improve that. The scope of the department's role in determining deployment of LEAP officers. This is based on an authorized and approved business plan agreed to by the city and the department. The deployments, as indicated, is data-led and evidence-based. These deployments are managed by means of bi-weekly operational meetings, and weekly reports received from the City of Cape Town as part of the MEC monitoring and evaluation process. And then any deviations is managed in terms of the business plan. The key requirements for the data that inform employments is the old 5 W's and an H, or 5 whiskeys and a hotel. I don't think it has anything to do with alcohol, but it's basically what the crime is, where it takes place, when it took place, why, what was the motive, who was involved, and then how the crime was committed. The data sources also, as alluded to in the Cardiff model, is also not only looking at the health data, but also statistics from the South African Police Services, the communities, specifically neighborhood watchers that's on the ground and that know the areas very well. They're often also the first whistleblowers and the first on the scene. And then also the Western Cape Liquor Authority that supports and provide information. And then also looking at ALITADs and the data that we gather through area-specific interventions that would also enhance the criminal justice system partners. Then this is just a snapshot of an example of what the safety dashboard looks like that's been developed. And this is, as we've indicated, it's based on forensic pathology services reports that allows for us to compare the data on month to month to see any changes in the homicide that's reported. So here, for example, it's indicated Harare, Kraaifontein, and so on. And in this period, it was in a period last year, I think June and July. So in that period, the total number of deaths, homicide deaths in Harare, for example, was 44, in Kraaifontein, 35. So for that month in the priority areas, it tells us that 264 homicide deaths, and then also an average. So one can see Guguletu's got a very high average of deaths. So this is just to show what the dashboard can tell you to look at where interventions should address crime areas. If one can maybe take an example here of Delft. So if one look in June of this year, in the example, it was 16. And then in July, a month later, it was also 16. So mostly in this example, it stabilized. And if one would go to Guguletu, one would see that in June, it was 20 in June. And then a month later, it came down to 10. So this is just an example of the dashboard. Then in terms of the homicide statistics, the latest in the 13 priority areas, as you can see in the graph, the highest homicide rates for the week up to last week was Harare 85, Delft 84, Kraaifontein 83, Khayelitsha 78, Mfuleni 76, and Nyanga also still high at 69. Then one can also see in terms of the homicide statistics, previously in the next slides, you'll see that the pre-intervention and the post-intervention, initially lead deployments were during the week, certain times of the day, and then we realized the data and the evidence showed us that crime is mostly taking place on Sundays and then on Saturdays, and even slightly on Monday mornings early. It also gives you the time and shows you that on a Sunday between 8 and 12, that's where the most incidences of homicide took place. And then again, later from 8 o'clock to 91. And then one needs to go and look at where and how did this take place. Was it around Shebeens or specific areas that's identified as hotspot areas? And similarly with Saturdays, it's also mostly in the evenings, 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Then the dashboard can also show you that the number of incidents by age. Here, the graph tells us that it's mostly between the ages of 25 to 30 that is involved in incidents. And here one can see incidents by sex. So the victims were mostly males. 70% of the incidents in this period was males, and 30% was females. So in this slide, one look at the percentage breakdown of homicides in the period from January to last week. So the total number was 47% was with gunshot wounds, and then 36 was with other sharp objects. If one would look at only the 13 priority areas for the same period, it still remains very high, and therefore we are sure that these are in fact the priority areas we should be focusing on as the major contributors to murder rate in the province. And here one can see 57% was due to gunshot wounds, and then 27% was sharp objects. So that also informs us in terms of the interventions and deployments. So just a little bit more information on the progress and determination of the LEAP deployment. As alluded to earlier, everything's based on the data we get from the Department of Health, and this has influenced our deployment. It tells us where the priority areas and the hotspots are, and what the circumstances of the murders were. So prior to the intervention in July 21, there was equal deployment in the priority areas, and then after that we realized in terms of the data that more LEAP officers were deployed in precincts with a higher murder rates, and the second set of deployment were prioritized to Kraaifontein, Mfuleni, Harare, and Guletu based on the latest health data at the time. So that's a real-time data that we use to affect the real-time deployment. So a reaction unit was also established to deal with the flare-ups and murders, and also an improvement in coordination between law enforcement agencies that's involved in this program. So since February, a third cohort of deployments has been extended to Atlantis and Philippi and Samora Machel, and that was also based on a correlation between the health data as well as crime statistics, hence the 13 priority areas. To assist with the identification of the day and day of the week and the time, one look at the incident pattern analysis as indicated earlier. So one could see here that before, since its inception to July last year, deployment was predominantly during weekdays, with 2 shifts between 6:30 and 10 o'clock, and then also overtime was paid when working on weekends. So then we realized, the data told us that we need to improve and change our interventions and deployment, and then we moved to 24-hour, 70-day shift system, and the deployment numbers were aligned to the murder data. So that's mostly when the murder occurs and the homicide incidents has happened. So over time, expenditure was then utilized for the operational leads. Just then, coming towards the end of the presentation, there was 116 law enforcement officers that are currently employed in terms of the program, with a further 154 officers that are currently being trained. They are permanently deployed in 15 high crime policing areas, that's now including the reaction unit areas, which 10 forms part of the top murder stations, and these were or are the Delft, Guguletu, Harare, Khayelitsha, Kraaifontein, Mfuleni, Mitchells Plain, Nyanga, Philippi East, and Samora Machel. The other high crime areas where there's deployments is, as indicated, Atlantis, Bishop Lavis, and Hanover Park in the Philippi area. And recently, a reaction unit has been deployed in Grassy Park and Steenberg to stabilize the area. In terms of LEAP officers currently in training and actual deployments, 87 members started their training on the 14th of March, and the training will be completed in the next 2 weeks in June. Then the 87 members will be used then to fill the consequential vacancies, and the additional is for any top-up that may occur should members take up permanent positions as in the past. Because they don't normally stay, they also apply for other positions and other jobs and do their career pathing. So then in total, 979 learner law enforcement officers and 137 commanders. Then there's also, which gives us a total of the 116 that's deployed in the 13 areas. And these 10 areas also form parts of the 10 murder areas in the Western Cape as determined by the South African Police Service. 194 LEAP members are deployed in the malls and 89 members at schools in the 13 areas. As the motor vehicle supplier has indicated that additional vehicles that was procured will only be available for delivery at the end of June. So we had to deploy them otherwise, but also linked to the high priority areas based on what the data tells us. Some of the successes since inception, there was a total of 6,599 arrests, 5.3 kilograms of TIC, alcohol, 8,500 liters of alcohol has been seized. There has been 578 drug arrests, 183 dangerous weapons seized, 203 firearms confiscated. Over 500,000 people were searched, and then also 8,133 tablets of Mandrax tablets have been seized. So in terms of the number of firearms, as indicated since the inception of the LEAP program, 203 firearms have been recovered. And before the intervention of changing to the 24 system, one can see here the dramatic increase of 348% in the firearm recovery rate. So we clearly see that that is working, and a lot of very good successes if one look at the number of gunshot wounds in what the data tells us. I think this is the end. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Butler. Members, you've seen the presentation. I'm just going to ask if Director Roberts would like to make any additional remarks on the city side, or if we're happy to go over to questions.
Chair, what I can add to the presentation, I just want to get to your questions regarding to question 1, the criteria that that they used to determine the funding allocation was given in slide 7 by the presenter. And then the directorate submit long-term plans to maintain the facilitation of LEAP was also indicated in slide 15. The criteria for LEAP officers deployment to specific areas within the municipality was given in slide 7 already. And then the scope of the LEAP officers jurisdiction and duties in respect of policing, investigation and arrest and crime intelligence in slide 22. I just want to indicate to you with regarding to that is that we are directly in these areas that were mentioned by Mr. Butler, is that we are working under the command and control of the South African Police directly at all of those stations. We are part of their planning and execution process. Mr. Brandt had a major role, played a major role in the relationship between the South African Police and the City of Cape Town, specifically with regarding to the planning process. There is a tactical joint planning process happening every Tuesday with all these stations and clusters in these affected areas as part of the integrated planning process on a Tuesday. So that is coordinated, and that is also covered. And then the relationship of municipal policing and law enforcement units with the Provincial South African Police Services. Chair, I can just indicate to you that currently there is a very good relationship. There were problems, thieving problems in the beginning, specifically with the planning and the execution process, and with the intervention of General Brandt and my intervention from the City of Cape Town, as well as the provincial Deputy Provincial Commissioner General Mansi and Brigadier Tukule. We established the weekly joint operational planning process, and I must tell you that there's sound and civil relationship between the city and DOCS, as well as with the South African Police Services, and I think our successes also indicate our integrated approach and our role and responsibility in fighting the murders in these particular stations. What I just want to add to you is in terms of the powers, and I've got a presentation that exists out of nearly 43 pages with regarding to all our powers, and I want to maybe just indicate to you headlines with regarding to our appointment, with regarding to peace officers. Now, every single LEAP member is appointed as a peace officer, and we are appointed in terms of Section 334 of the Criminal Procedure Act, and then a law enforcement officer is also appointed in terms of the declaration of a peace officer, in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act of 1977, Act 51 of 1977. Chair, I can make this presentation available to you for further dissemination to all the attenders at this particular forum meeting, and then they can clearly see what is our legislative mandate with regarding to the LEAP members. But they are appointed as law enforcement officers, and they are all appointed as peace officers, and that is where we got our mandate to execute our duties within the affected areas. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Director Roberts. Members, I'm now going to hand over to you. If you could raise your hands if there are any questions, and we'll take the list of hands raised. To start off with, I see Member Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions, Chairperson. I think Director Roberts knew that I'm going to ask about the powers, and we would want to, get that presentation on the Criminal Procedure Act, the powers of the LEAP officers. Just a question, Chairperson. The first question I want to ask is, the presentation spoke about, reducing the murder rate, reducing the murder rate by 2029, 50%. Now, the LEAP officers are deployed at the hotspots. And sometimes LEAP officers, as the presenter said, was deployed in Grassy Park to stabilize the area. Now, Lavender Hill is also a problem. So people say when LEAP officers come in, they stabilize the area, then they leave, and then there's flare-ups again. Is there a plan after an area has been stabilized, not one of the hotspots, 10 hotspots, talking about the area where LEAP officers sent into because suddenly there's a flare-up? What is the action after that to make sure that the area stays stabilized? Another question is, there's other areas where you have flare-ups, and is LEAP officers specifically now just going to go into the murder hotspots, because are they not also deployed, irrespective if there's flare-ups, do they go to those areas almost immediately? And because data will say this is the problem that we have. Just another question, Chair. The LEAP officers, as I think Director Roberts said, they work under the command of SAPS and so on. The question is, so the public can the public get direct in those hotspots where they are deployed? Do they have direct access to the LEAP officers? Are the numbers freely available if you have, crime being committed in those areas? I'm speaking specifically in those hotspots areas. Maybe just the last question, Chair, for now is, you know, many of these areas where they're in are gang-ridden areas, gangsters fight. So do they also determine, you know, this is gangsters being killed and murdered? Do they have that percentages as well? I'm asking that because, you know, gangs are very strategic. They are very clever. So they move from area to area and they know where, I'm telling you now, the gangsters know where our officers are deployed. They know where the officers are, and they will then target other areas because, you know, it's not so it's not so hot in those areas. So they move to the areas where they can commit more crimes and more murder. And maybe just the final question: how does the ordinary law enforcement officers, not the LEAP office, the ordinary law enforcement of Metro Police, how do they assist in the, are they all part of this plan with, I know SAPS is it, but your Metro Police officers and your normal law enforcement, are they all incorporated in reducing the murder rate in the 10 capital areas? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Christians. Before I hand over to Member Karma, who's next in line, I see Alderman JP Smith. I see your hand. Is that a question that you'd like to ask or input?
Chair, response to the member's questions, but potentially, if you wish, I could respond to him and Member Karma simultaneously. We have a council meeting starting at 10, and I did indicate that I would only be able to stay until the start of the council meeting.
Okay, let's just quickly do Member Karma's question, and then we'll hand over to you to respond first.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I think, like member, let me welcome the presentations. And like member Christians, I think we should look at this based on what is our target, which is that of halving the murder rate, I think by 2029. And looking at the presentation, and I think for now, Chair, I'll ask one question because I'm also looking at time so that we can give Mr. Smith an opportunity to respond. But I want to just ask this general question because when I'm looking at the presentation itself, and at the end, worried by slides 28 and 29, because 28 and 20, and specifically 28 gives you an idea of who is committing or these or it gives homicide statistics on age and gender, and you would see that the most affected would be young people, and mostly it would be young males. And it leads to a point that we have always been making around the responsiveness of our approach to fighting crime. Now, I want to check because I was asking myself a question: would we achieve this? And the answer I came to is a definite no. And now I want in this instance to check with this whether the city and the department as to, because there's an issue of a safer, because I think we need to do more, and there's a issue of a safer city model in fighting crime, which we know was delayed in the city of Cape Town. Now, when one looks at this model, which is mainly about coordinating, having a coordinated approach between all spheres of government, business, and other sectors of society. Now, I want to check with the department, have we looked at what would be the possible benefits and how this LEAP program would then be of real value when it operates within that safer city model. So I just want to get a thinking of the department, whether it's even the city, around this issue. And as I've said, Chair, if through you, I may stop here so that we give Mr. Smith an opportunity to respond, noting that he had said at 10 there's a council meeting that is starting. But can I get guidance to you, Chair? Other than that, I have many questions that I can go to.
Thanks, Member Kama. So let us then go over to Alderman Smith, so he still has time to run to the council meeting as well, and then we'll come back for the next round. Alderman Smith, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, the powers Director Roberts or Deputy Chief Sean Smith or Leon Wenzel in law enforcement can comfortably speak to. Those are as authorized by the National Minister in 2018. The LEAP are obviously deployed in hotspots as determined by province. That's in terms of the transfer payment agreement, in terms of province's contribution. But there is a short-term or a more flexible mechanism for responding to active shooting through an SOP, which is activated jointly by province and the city. And so, for instance, the reaction unit, which is composed of some of the officers drawn from every area, have done interventions in LCs where their efforts were immediately effective, as stated publicly by the Station Commissioner in a meeting which I attended, and also in Grassy Park, where again, we very rapidly saw a significant reduction and in fact cessation of violence, as also confirmed in a public meeting I attended. So we do wish we had more LEAP officers that could stabilize the entire city all the time, but these are expensive interventions. And remember, our core business ideally should be traffic and bylaw enforcement. And the reality is that with what's happening with national policing resources, we have increasingly had to step into these spaces with our gang enforcement, liquor enforcement, marine enforcement, rail enforcement. Ideally, these should be things that we shouldn't have to spend money on and budget on. But the significant staff shortages in SAPS are driving or compelling us to do so, because we can't simply stand by and look on at what's happening to our communities. The public very much have access to the law enforcement officers through 107 from a landline or 0214807700 from a cell phone. We even handed out pamphlets and we sent out digital content to communities, also advising them that we will pay a reward for information on firearms and otherwise. And I think displacement is a reality. I have had station commanders tell me that there is a displacement phenomena, but I think the crux of the matter here is convictions. And I do hope that the majority of this portfolio committee's time will be devoted to pursuing the matter of the conviction rate. We know we have a 2 to 3% conviction rate for gang-related violence. And as long as that happens, putting more and more officers on the street to try and chase down the criminals is not going to help. You have to get the criminals out of circulation. There has to be a meaningful conviction rate. By any international standard, our conviction rate is almost non-existent. So this, I think, really is something that your portfolio committee could dramatically help these communities by emphasizing and pursuing this matter significantly. LEAP are ordinary law enforcement officers, and they do constant joint operations with law enforcement, with Metro Police, with SAPS, and with traffic. I've been on several of these where I have observed the roles of the other enforcement agencies. And then, Chair, in terms of Member Kama's comments, we have a range of whole of society interventions in terms of the economic development, drug treatment, access to basic services. And by each of those metrics, Cape Town is doing more than any other local authority in this regard. The point is gang violence persists because to deal with gang violence, you're going to need dedicated and organized policing response. You're going to need special prosecutors and an increasing investment in your specialized units around combating this. The AGU is a step in the right direction, as is the city's gang and drug task team, but there needs to be a lot more done on the prosecutorial side and on the investigative side. We are very short of investigators. And when you speak to investigators in these hotspots, their caseload is such that we can understand why that conviction rate is so low. And I also hope that that's something that the Portfolio Committee will increasingly emphasize, so that we can go look at where those low-hanging fruits are that will bring benefit to the communities and really drive those matters. That's why the city has deployed investigating persons to the LEAP units now, that are going to start doing watching briefs over what happens to the firearm and drug and gang-related arrests we do, so that those start leading to convictions and they don't just fall off the prosecutorial agenda, because otherwise that work is in vain and the communities don't get long-term relief, or, as was pointed out, we displace the crime. So I think LEAP is very much of real value as it is now, as the stats demonstrate, but we would absolutely like to do more, either with more LEAP, or we have to see more SAPS officers deployed in these areas, so that we can get closer to international best practice standards. We are very, very far off from those. We have spoken to police stations who have candidly acknowledged to us that they have one officer for every 1,700 members of the public. That is inadequate to the point where you can reasonably predict the pain and misery the community are going through. We are also working with DOC's chair to deepen LEAP in terms of the school resource officers, the neighbourhood safety orientation, the Mayor's Urban Regeneration Project in these areas, supporting and bolstering the neighbourhood watches. So we're doing a range of concurrent investments and working with DOCs to, as in terms of the discussions with MEC Alan, to deepen the support structures that attach to LEAP, so that we can do more social development interventions appended to that, and that our interventions are increasingly less policing focused. And with that, you will have to forgive me, sir. I can hear the speaker ringing the bell for us to enter council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Alderman Smith, and enjoy the council meeting as much as you can enjoy a day in the chambers. Colleagues, I just want to check, Member Kama, do you mind if I hand over to the department and to Dr. Roberts to respond to the questions by yourself and Member Christians, and then come back to you and Member Windvogel?
That's in order, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'll then hand over to Mr. Butler and to Director Roberts to respond to that first round of questions.
Chair, from the City of Cape Town, I don't know if I can go first, Mr. Butler.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. Chair, just to come back to the first set of questions with regarding to the stabilization of an area, what is happening after the stabilization was achieved. That is then where when we are withdrawing that particular reaction group from LEAP out of that particular area, that is where normalization need to step in by the South African Police Services within that particular area, and to ensure that the crime that was reported during that pre-period has been stabilized and normalized, so that the normality can return back to the community. Now, in that particular approach, the South African Police also is assisted by the City of Cape Town in terms of Metro Police, law enforcement and traffic. That particular station commander, should it be in Steenberg, should it be in Grassy Park, should it be in Hanover Park, then can call upon the Metro Police, traffic and law enforcement that are deployed within that particular area to assist with integrated operations, with joint operations. And we as a city also have our own autonomous operations within that particular areas to enforce our bylaws or our traffic laws with regarding to that area. So we identified, and there's communication between myself and General Brandt from DOCS with the approval of our Executive Director and the HOD Advocate Pillay with regarding to the deployment of the reaction units to the specific area. Then with regarding to LEAP officers work under the command and control, and do the public have access to them? Yes, definitely. Within the city, we are using the EPIC system, and that is where all our service requests that are phoned through the 107 number or the 480-7788 number are directed to those members in that particular area, should it be a need for them to assist. But I also want to just indicate that apart from our LEAP members that are deployed in those 13 areas, we've got also our normal deployment of Metro Police traffic and law enforcement in that areas, and they can make use of service requests by phoning through to 107 or the 480-7700 number, and we will assist any member of the public in that particular areas. With regarding to the gang areas, I just want to indicate to you, apart from our LEAP deployment in the gang areas, there's also a tactical forum between the South African Police and the anti-gang unit from the South African Police and the GDT unit from the City of Cape Town. And they are planning weekly operations and deployed on a weekly basis to the hotspot areas with regarding to the movement of the gang violence in that area. Should it be from Manenberg to Hanover Park to Bishop Lavis to Elsie's River, whatever, or to Steenberg, that particular movement of gang violence is being monitored by the 5-pillar approach of the South African Police, namely intelligence gathering, operational, reaction, investigation, and communication, and that is how it is coordinated, apart from LEAP, between the AGU, the anti-gang unit, and the GDT of the City of Cape Town. Then just with regarding to the young males and the young people, as indicated by Alderman Smith, there are various projects that are currently running in those areas, and that is where the neighborhood watches are also playing a major role with regarding to get awareness programs to the young males and the young people not to be part and parcel of committing crime in that area. Then maybe just on the Safer City model, Chair, I'm the coordinated person with the South African Police, the Deputy Provincial Commissioner Mansi. The two of us are currently coordinating the Safer City model within the city. And yes, we currently focused on 9 working streams as part of the Safer City model. And one of them is technology, where the city are using cameras, drones, the eye in the sky, the shot spotter, the dash cams, and various technology with the NPR cameras as well to sort of contribute to the Safer City model in order to ensure the safety of our communities within the metropole. There are currently 9 working streams, and myself and Jill Mansi are having a meeting tomorrow with National in the coordination of the Safer City model. Then, Chair, I am willing to put up the presentation with regarding to the powers of the law enforcement officers that are also police officers. It's about 43 slides long, but if you want me to put it up, I can present it to the portfolio. That's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Maybe what we can do is we can have the presentation sent to the procedural officer of this committee, and then that can be disseminated to members. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, I think sure, Director Roberts gave a very detailed and comprehensive response. There's not much for me to add. I just maybe want to ask General Brandt if he wants to add anything that we can add to Director Roberts' input, if I may.
Mr. Brandt, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Chair. No, I think I'm covered with the responses that was given. But one thing that we must remember, and specifically on the question of Member Karma on the youth, is The LEAP deployments, as Mr. Butler has indicated, is only one part of the Western Cape Safety Plan, and this is the stabilization part of the plan. So the violence prevention, and specifically more the social cohesion, should address this in terms of the Western Cape Safety Plan, but from the social crime perspectives with the South African Police Service, there's also interventions in these areas. But the main focus at this stage was first to get the data and to let the data guide us where to go. And I think if you look at the release of the crime stats of the last 2 quarters, you could see that the Western Cape was the only province in the country that actually had a decrease in murders for 2 consecutive quarters. And we're seeing forward to the release of the crime stats on coming Friday also. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm now going to hand over to Member Windvogel and then to Member Kama. Member Windvogel, are you there?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, mine is on the K9 units. I'm actually happy to hear about K9 units in the rural areas. So if they are talking about these K9 units in the rural areas, can they perhaps give us names of the municipality in the rural areas that have these units and what criteria was used to choose these municipality? Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Member Kama.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, and let me welcome the responses that would have been given so far. But I think firstly, also on what I think Mr. Brand would have said, yes, one also chair has that understanding that this is focused on stabilization, and there's that other one of responding to the causative factors. But the point was, if that other one does not happen, we will still, because with this project, we are also now talking about how constrained it is. And I think when we get the opportunity with Member Smith again, we'll be able to, I think, dismiss this notion of when we respond to questions, Chair, we say we were not supposed to do this, it's so-and-so's mandate. I think the fact here now is that the government has decided to, according to its own words, do something about crime, and monies from the provincial coffers are being spent. And when we ask questions, trying to interrogate the value of that spending, I think they must be responded to and not be given that issue of no, it's so-and-so's mandate. And the comparison also, Mr. Brand, must, through you, Chair, we must caution about this comparison of Western Cape and other provinces, because crime patterns in the Western Cape also do not equate with those of other provinces. So the efforts have to generally be more. So the one question, Chair, that one wants to ask also is on I think from 15 and 16, and this can be provided later if the detail is not there. If we can get a total breakdown of funds that would have been spent to date since the inception of the project, like it gives specifics on what was spent on recruitment and training. It then gives us specifics on what was spent on machinery and equipment, and 3 on the salaries. The other question I have, Chair, on slide 18, and links to the point I was trying to make earlier, and I think even Mr. Smith, by the way, would have also touched it in terms of the numbers of the LEAP or officers. I think when the 3,000, and the department must help us in this regard, when the 3,000 pronouncement was made in 2019, one assumes that that 3,000 pronouncement was made looking at the data, advised by the data, and looking at what would be close to sufficient, in terms of responding to the crime picture and towards the realization of halving the murder rate. Because that's why we are doing this spending of halving the murder rate by 2029. Now, I want to check that within these gazetted amounts or future projections, are we still looking at, because I've never received an answer to this question, are we still looking at the 3,000 LEAP officers at any given time in the future, or it will depend on what we are able to do or the increases as we move forward? I think that's the first question. On slide 25, Chair, I would really like the department to, I was confused in that slide where it gives a month-on-month change in homicides by precinct. I want to get an understanding of what this slide talks to, because I think the FPS, it says the FPS report comparing July to June. That's where firstly I'm also confused, because on the actual figures, the graphs there, it gives you of a 1st June to a 1st July. Now I want to get an understanding as to, is that of last year, which is 2021 figures. So I really want to, I'm confused, Chair, in that particular slide. The other question I have on 27, Chair, I think we would have been informed quite recently that the LEAP officers now operate 24 hours. Now, what I want to understand in that is how many, if they operate 24 hours, how many shifts, if you can talk to the shifts there, and as to how many members are lead of members are on a shift, and how are we dealing with the issue, or do we have any challenges of absenteeism in that regard? Those are my questions for now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just a question from my side, Mr. Butler. Has there been any thinking or discussion around possibly applying for national skills funding to augment the training of more LEAP officers, especially outside of the city of Cape Town? And then I'll hand over to you, Mr. Butler, to answer that round of questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, let me see. I'm going to have to ask my acting HOD to assist with the 3,000 boots on the ground, as indicated in the safety plan. Then in terms of the slide 25, the dashboard slide, yeah, that was, if I remember correctly, that was for June and July 2021. And it was just comparative. Maybe I can suggest that a presentation be done by either the VPU at the Department of Health or Department of the Premier about the recent safety dashboard that was launched. It's just a suggestion from my side, if I'm allowed to do that. At this moment, the detail of how many members on the shift and absenteeism. Perhaps Director Roberts, if he can assist in answering that question.
Sorry, I was standing with Director Roberts, if I can proceed. We had to leave the urgent meeting. I typed in I am on the side. There had been an urgent meeting on land invasions priority committee. Concerning the leap in the areas where they're deployed in the 11 areas, they're working 24-hour shifts, which means the shift, if there's a total amount of people attached to an area, police station area, that will have to be divided by 4, which will give you the total per shift. For instance, in the Nyanga area, there's 70 officers deployed, so it'll be 17 per shift. The same for the Delft area, where there's 86, is 21 per shift. And Kalicha side B, 69, which give you a total of also 17 per shift. So all the areas, as you break it up, the areas differ in numbers that's deployed. Depends on the homicide stat for the area, what it reads for that area, or the crime rating. That the model that we work on, we actually decide as to how many people you find. Areas such as Atlantis will only have 48 because the homicides aren't that high in that area, which got to be split, divided by 4 as well. And then of course the area of Bishop Lavis, it's 40 people, which give you 10 per shift in that area.
Chair, sorry.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Chair, it's David could see I can just respond to some of the other questions that were also posed.
Please go ahead, Mr. Kutsia.
Just to member Windvogel regarding the K9 units in the rural area. Currently, it's at Overstrand, Swartland, and Mossel Bay. So these units are basically being piloted at those areas to see how effective they are and how supportive they can be to law enforcement in the rural areas. So the criteria used was, we looked, for example, at Swartland, the N7, which is a drug influx route, and the Weybridge outside Moreesburg, and then Matsikama. So the dog unit in Swartland works in that whole district right up to the Weybridge in Matsikama, and it covers those access routes. Overstrand was also around the poaching and drug trade in that area, and it's also for that whole district, and which we now recently started this year is on the M2 at Mossel Bay to cover that garden route and district municipality. So a big motivator also is to look at the municipality's current capacity to see that if they can then deal with the infrastructure of managing one of these dog units, because it does take a bit of organizational and administrative support to manage that. So the lessons we learn from this, we would then look at a rollout to cover specifically on the N1. Is our next objective is to have a unit that can support the N1 corridor. So the request, so with regards to the LEAP numbers, our current projections and budget is for the 1,000 members. So we have slightly exceeded, as you see now, we're at 1,200 members. But we also required as a department every year to submit a budget. So the funding is now only secured currently for the current 1,000. We had to do an impact assessment, which is now in process of being finalized, which we would then submit to Treasury. And then our motivation in this year's MTech is then to motivate for additional resources. But that is an administrative process that we have to go, and it's also have to compete for other funds. So it's not just that we automatically get funding, but we have to demonstrate that effective and efficient and that the project is actually impacting and achieving its objectives. Chair, the question you had with the National Skill Fund. So what we are also doing, where we assist quite a few rural municipalities, is an expanded public works program, where we train law enforcement officers. It was mentioned in the presentation in the slide that there are 300 training opportunities. So those are requests where we train members of the community, persons from the chrysalis, on peace officer status and train them, and then they actually deployed. We deployed in Beaufort West, Laingsburg, Prince Albert, Sierra. So as also a part of this law enforcement for rural, we assist municipalities then with peace officers based on the expanded public works program. Chair, I think we've covered all the questions. Thank you. Sorry, Chair, just a breakdown of the funding for Member Karma, where we will submit a more detailed funding breakdown, because that is part of the business plan. So we do have that.
Thank you very much for that. Members, can I get an indication if you have any other questions? As a last round, I see Member Christians and then Member Kama.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just another question. Thinking of the LEAP officers. Question, Chairperson, is that we now know that the areas, the times when people, when crime is rife. Just a question. So if we know, for instance, on Sundays that crime is rife between certain times, so you don't wait for crime to flare up, because surely now with intelligence driven, you will know in that specific precinct, you would know where the problems areas are, right? So you will then deploy your LEAP officers accordingly. But if there is around a Sabine or certain things, is there action then taken because there's a specific Sabine that these stuff happen? Is the data so that it can bring it down to even to the street level, to the Sabine level, and then proactively you have a visibility so that you don't have those areas? Is the detail so that you can even zone into the specific areas? Because then you should be able to level, the playing ground. So just a question on that. And maybe just another question is, you have the 10 hotspots. And of course, as we saw, it changes a bit from area to area because the LEAP officers are employed in those areas. If you have your areas of control, and I heard the answer, because then law enforcement SAPs must then, come into the areas. But if you, for one moment, know that crime has subsided, do you then intelligence-driven go to other areas where you see potential flare-ups, not so much, but just to neutralize those things? And I know the big thing is the murder rate, it's the big thing. But I'm just thinking of, people just feel safer when areas are, well patrolled and well policed. And I know what Alderman J.P. Smith said. It's not the responsibility, prime responsibility. That's not of the city or even of the province, because that is South African Police. But the province and the city has not taken that responsibility to say, because it's under-resourced, because we underfunded when it comes to policing, people must be safe, and this is the measures that the city and the city must take, and the province. Just we know in the Department of Community Safety we have the watching briefs, because that is one area. It's always our concern is the conviction rate. So does the city, how does the city work with the province to speak to the conviction rate, to speak to the justice system? Is there something like in place? But also the other thing is our LEAP officers so informed that they can make it easier for the investigations, because of course they don't investigate, the police investigates. But are they, do they make it easier? Are they so trained that from their side, if they pass it on for investigations, that everything is in place, that not from their side? Because Chairperson, I'm talking a lot, but I'm just talking about previously we had the police and we had the department, and we looked at conviction rates and all of those type of things, and we saw a lot of flaws as with and the SAPS did correct certain things and so on when the department goes back. I'm just worried. Again, a red flag is the conviction rate. We have all this boots on the ground, and yet we don't make a real impact when it comes to the conviction. So just, is there cooperation, how to improve? I know they cannot do the job of them, but how do we work as different spheres in order to make sure that our money that we spend on the LEAP officers is not going into vain, but that there are criminals that's off the street because of the good work of our men in blue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Christians. Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I didn't get, unless if I missed it, on the issue of the shifts. If we can get an understanding of how are they structured and how many people are the members are there available for deployment per shift. But the other question that I wanted to ask, Chair, it's linked to the response that would have been given on the K9 units. I want to get an understanding of why are these understanding on what these units can do. Why are they not in the entry points of the province? And in that, what support is the program giving to subs in terms of identifying and closing down your drug dens in the province, and closing down your drug labs in the province, understanding that there are operations that subs even at a point of that subs is leading even at the point of closing labs even in Gauteng, because most of these even your meth, you'd find that it's coming from that other part of the it's hugely manufactured and coming from that other part of the country. Now I want to get an understanding there as to what support and why are these units not stationed at the entry points, because that's where these drugs enter. That's where even some of these firearms enter. So why are they not in those points? Wouldn't they be effective, so to say, if they were at those particular points? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the department for responses.
Thank you, Chair. Member Christians, regarding the LEAP and the hotspots, and yeah, so that is precisely what the data and evidence is guiding, is that it's very specific. So as you said, they are proactive deployed in that area. So every shift there would be a briefing, and then based on the briefing, the LEAP and SAPs, they would deploy into area, as you said, to be proactive. The Liquor Authority is also supplying information and also will have operations focused on shebeens. So the whole idea is then to be visible and to actually proactively try and prevent that crime from happening. With regards to the conviction rate, what our watching brief is focused on, so although we're doing policing oversight, we're identifying the systemic issues at the police station that go to court in cases that are withdrawn. So our oversight is now also going back from court, back to a detective branch, to actually then start addressing those specific issues identified, to see if we cannot, from that perspective, then improve the conviction rate. But that's for the whole province. It's not just specifically in the LEAP areas, but also where we need to do something around that. So that's what the watching briefs are focusing on. We also do have engagements with the NPA to also to discuss issues, and an example of that is we're working with the NPA department, and the National Prosecuting Authority is busy with a firearm reduction strategy, because also you saw a lot of incidents happen in the metro is with firearms. So we are collaborating to come up with a firearms reduction strategy, which is consulted with SAPS, and it's got various role players. So we are presenting, this has been presented to the Prof joints, and it's been presented to the safety MANCO tomorrow. And then we're hoping to get endorsement to establish a task team specifically to look at all the role players and how we actually then work on a strategy to reduce the availability of firearms. With regards to the shifts, I don't remember, Karma, it was indicated that it's about 17 members per shift. If we can ask the city, maybe if you want to just repeat what they did say. So the K9 units are focused on to assist SAPS in those rural districts. You are finding that the dog units are there to focus on drugs, illegal firearms. So where they are situated, they are covering the entry points. As I said, the N7 goes right up to Matsikama, where there's a weighbridge that's outside Claver, and then we've got the weighbridge, and then they have operations in that whole N7 sector. The same is taking place in the Overstrand, and what we're moving now towards is to look at the N1. We need to establish a point, but as I said, it's also about that municipality's capacity, and it doesn't help we invest. It's about 4 million rand to get us started, but there's a lot of maintenance, dogs and infrastructure needed, and it needs to be maintained. So we also have, we do assess the municipality's ability before we decide where to do it, and if we can get a strategic advantage. Yeah, and then it's also, so the metro around, so we do focus on the entry routes to try and prevent drugs coming in, that they don't get to the drug dens and known drug houses, and that's a support on those rural routes. And SAPS is then focusing in the metro on that law enforcement. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I from the city side respond?
Please go ahead, Mr. Smith.
From the city side to Mr. Christian. As explained earlier, the crime data analysis, the stats is what drive us to the times when crime happening on the ground in streets, around Shabines or maybe drug outlets, those areas. You'll see there's a slide on stop and searches, which is done, especially in those areas around where the crime is very prevalent on the ground. And all our overtime and stuff, where there's overtime available, we will work on the crime stats analysis for that week with SAPS at the SAPS station level and see where is needed and what time is needed. So instead of bringing maybe off the normal shift will maybe work 1800 till 0600 the next morning, but they are there already. Normally we will support them then as of maybe, say for instance, the crime is happening between 2100 hours and 3 o'clock the next morning. We will then bring on a shift from 2000 hours until maybe the next morning at 0400 hours to deal with specific hotspots in that areas to assist the current deployment of SAPS as well as the other LEAP officers in the area to focus on crime in that area. So that's how we use the overtime, which is data driven. Concerning Shabines, illegal liquor outlets and liquor outlets, training is ongoing with LEAP officers. We are busy now training with the Western Cape Liquor Authority, and we work very close with them as well in areas where there's a lot of problems. So eventually, within a space of maybe hopefully by the end of this year, all the LEAP officers will be trained in liquor as well in liquor enforcement by the Liquor Authority and know what to do when they do go into those areas. It's ongoing training that's happening, especially when it comes around crime scene management. and statement taking. That's what's done at the Metro Police College, as well as SAPS also is assisting us with that training now as well. So to make sure that when our part of the job is done correctly, and working close with the detectives around that as well, to make sure that our statements you do give in actually cover the crime that was committed, and that the crime scene is not corrupted by the first responder is on the scene as well. And then concerning the conviction rate, and we've got watching briefs as well that see to all cases of LEAP. So every Monday morning we will send out all major arrests, either around drugs or firearms or ammunition. That will go into the watching brief, and that is monitored then from through the Director Roberts' office and on the watching briefs and with province as well. Then on the shifts to Member Kama, if there's 1,000 officers per shift covering the 10 areas, will be around 250 officers, but the 10 areas are broken up. So some areas don't, the numbers not equal per area. A normal space has just been 25 per shift per area. But because some areas actually have much more crime, and the other areas are maybe smaller, but the data is data driven, how we deploy the stuff. So I can give you the 10 areas and tell exactly what is working. I said earlier in Yanga, the overall deployment for that area is 70, but per shift will be 17. In Delft is 86, but per shift will be 21. Galicia Site B is 69, deployment per shift will be 17. Hanover Park is 48 overall, per shift is 12. Bishop Lavis, there's 40 overall, there's 10 per shift. In Feleni, there's 85 overall, 21 per shift. Harare, 85, 21 per shift. Sorry, Harare is 79, 20 per shift. Atlantis, 48, 12 per shift. And the reaction unit consists of 64 per shift. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for those comprehensive responses. Members, I'm now going to ask if there are any final questions. Perfect. I don't see any hands. I'd like to thank the colleagues from the Department of Community Safety as well as the City of Cape Town for making yourselves available to answer our questions on the LEAP program. I think it's important to note that this program does make a significant impact in stabilizing and that we do need to find long-term solutions. And I like the reminder by Mr. Brandt that we need to also look at it in context of the safety plan as a whole. And it is encouraging to hear that we do have cooperation with all safety stakeholders, including the South African Police Service, who ultimately bears the responsibility for protecting our communities. And it is encouraging, but also quite alarming to see that such large amounts of money is going from the province and the city to something that is not its core mandate. But we do understand that you can't have a prosperous Western Cape if you don't have a safe Western Cape. So thank you very much for joining us, colleagues from the Department of Community Safety. We always appreciate your input. You are more than welcome to exit the meeting now, and the members will stay behind for us to do some of our committee housekeeping.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honourable members.
Thank you.
Members, with that, I'm now going to ask our procedural officer to flight. Before we flight minutes, let me just get an indication of whether members have any resolutions or requests for additional information flowing out of that presentation. Just noting that one of the resolutions were that Mr. Brandt was going to share with us the 69-page presentation on the powers of the LEAP officers, as well as all of the City of Cape Town law enforcement and Metro Police officers. And then on the screen, as you can see, our very capable procedural officer has also listed the breakdown of the funds that have been used as it's reflected in the department's business plan for leave. And then the details of the K9 rollout. And then a list of the number of leave officers per area, which that was given to us verbally now, but we'll get that in writing as well. Are there any other resolutions? Member Kama?
No, thank you, Chair. I would like to propose, because I think Director was it Roberts? He spoke on the question I asked about the safer city model, and indicated that there is some work that they are doing with general money, and I think even indicated that there's even a meeting they're attending tomorrow. So if we can get a brief, Chair, on from the two, which is the city and subs, on this safer city model. So if you can get a briefing on the safer city model as to, I know it's a project that is being piloted, but we get the briefing around that. Thanks.
Member Christians?
Yes, Chair, just I see the procedural officers just looking at the presentation of the powers. It's the presentation of the lead officer powers according to section 334 of the Criminal Procedure Act. So we just want the powers of the lead officers according to the Criminal Procedure Act, because I know that's a question I asked previously. It's section, I'm just checking, Criminal Procedure Act of 51 of 1977, section 334. If we can just have those powers explained, because you know sometimes we know if we talk about law enforcement officers, we just talk about law enforcement officers to enforce bylaws, but the Criminal Procedure Act gives you specific powers, and that is maybe that I would like us to know what powers do they have when it comes to executing their mandate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Kama, is that a new hand?
No, it's a legacy hand, sorry, Chair.
A legacy hand. Thank you. Members, can I also propose that we resolve to invite the South African Police Service to give the committee a briefing on its strategy on dealing with gang violence in the Western Cape, specifically on what SAPS is doing, and that we also invite the National Prosecuting Authority and the Department of Justice to talk to us about the conviction rate in the Western Cape as far as it pertains to violent crime and gangs.
Thank you, Chair. My hand is up again. I agree with that. Can I just add another one, Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
Chair, I know we had a briefing some time ago, but I think we will have to get SAPS again to come explain to us, the under-resources of police in the Western Cape, and what is the plans to address those under-resource, because it's just not under-resource when it comes to police officers, it comes to other resources as well, police vans and all of those type of things. So if we can just get SAPS, the police commissioner, to come and say what is the plans to address the shortfall when it comes to resources of police, because you've mentioned it, there's so much money now put in by the province and the city to have a safer city, but SAPS must come to the party. They must say what they are doing to address these shortfalls that we have in the Western Cape. So I would like a presentation on that, Chair.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. If we can also, Mr. Matthews, just include on the briefing to deal with gang violence, if they could give us an update on the disposal of firearms and the storage of firearms within SAPS in the Western Cape, and specifically how these firearms are ending up back on the streets. Member Kama, is that a legacy hand?
No, thanks. No, thanks, Chair. I also wanted to support the recommendation, the resolutions that you were tabling with also member Christians. But I wanted to, I don't know now, this looks like might be a whole day meeting where you were also adding now on the strategy to deal with gang violence. Now, one understands, Chair, that while it's not only the cause for the fights, the territorial fights in terms of this gang violence, while drugs are not only the cause, I meant to say, but there's a huge impact of drug dealing in these gang conflicts. Now, I wanted the Chair, if we can get an understanding, because the closure, which is what I was asking earlier in a meeting, of these drug houses and labs also will impact in that strategy. So I was wondering if we're able to also get the city to be part of the meeting, because in one of the responses that I once got from subs, you would find that some of these houses were or that are identified as drug houses, you would find that they belong to they are property of the city, and we want to get an understanding now on the cooperation between the two in terms of closing these houses where drug activities would have been identified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Kama. And then just another note, if we could also get a briefing at our next meeting on the Western Cape safety dashboard.
Is that all, Chair?
That's all from my side, and I'm judging by the silence from members that that seems quite a lot already. Colleagues, can we now go and flight the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of March 2022? You should all have received those minutes. It was
just 1 second, Chair. I'm now there.
No, that's fine, but it was a meeting, the briefing by the Premier of the Western Cape into the investigative report into Mr. Fritz. Okay, the first page deals with attendance. And the second page outlines the context of the meeting, then has a summary of the discussion that took place. And then the last page deals with the committee's resolution, as well as the requests for information. Are there any changes or amendments that needs to be made to these minutes? I see no hands. Can I get a member to propose adoption of the minutes? I see Member Kama.
I propose that we adopt the minutes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Bartman.
I second.
Thank you very much. We're now then going to put the minutes of the next meeting, which, if I'm correct, was the 18th of March. And that was the discussion on vote for Community Safety Western Cape Appropriations Bill 2022. And the first page deals with attendance, as well as the welcome note, and then the deliberations with the then Acting Minister of Community Safety. The next page then deals with the request for information, which is a whole page long. And then it also deals with the additions to the committee program. Can we get a proposer for this minutes, Member Kama?
I propose that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Bartman?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Members, I just want to note as well that on this, the minutes of the meeting of the 18th, there's a proposed oversight visit to the K9 unit in Mossel Bay. So maybe we just need to look at how do we link that to the resolution that we took today, and how we can maybe link the presentation on the K9 unit with an actual visit to the K9 unit. And then, members, the next document for us to adopt would be the committee's draft annual activity report. And the first page deals with attendance or committee composition. The second page deals with membership attendance at the different committee meetings, and also the mandate of the committee. And then it deals with the reporting departments, the different portfolios. It also outlines the amount of activities taken by this committee for cultural affairs, which is 7 meetings and 3 public hearings, 1 cluster visit. And then it deals with the community safety component of the portfolio, and also then deals with the number of activities. So we've had 10 meetings with 3 public hearings, 1 oversight visit, and then 1 cluster visit. Then it deals with the legislation that was processed by this committee, the public engagement, and then the financial particulars. And just a note, you'll see the amount of money that was allocated to the committee as well, and it outlines our expenditure. May I get a proposer to adopt this report? I see Member Bartman.
I propose that we adopt.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Member Christians?
Chair, second.
Thank you very much. With that, members, that concludes the housekeeping. Are there any other issues that members would like to bring to our attention before we conclude?
Chair.
Member Windvogel and then Member Bartman. Member Windvogel.
Chairperson, perhaps you must just guide us or guide me in terms of our resolutions taken. Is there a session where we can look at our resolutions and report of feedback from this different departments? Is there a process where we discuss the feedback that we get from them? I just need guidance in terms of that, because what we are doing is taking resolutions, but we don't look at the feedback. And are we happy is there things that we need to do or do follow-ups or whatever the case may be? If you can just guide me in terms of that, Chairperson, thank you.
I think what would be a good thing is if at our next meeting, we can have a sort of, we've got a resolution tracker document where the procedural officer puts all of the resolutions into a table that tells us what the status of those resolutions are, and then the committee can decide what the follow-ups, appropriate follow-ups need to be. So we'll prepare and update that document for the next meeting, and we'll make sure that members get it beforehand, and then we can have a discussion about what the committee's next action step should be. As you know, I just got here this morning, so I will be looking at that. Member Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to make a proposal that if we need to go to Mossel Bay, I know that in the week of the 18th until the 21st, the Petitions Committee is also going to Mossel Bay. And I know that week the Education Committee is hoping to complete some of their resolutions in that area as well. But if it's possible, perhaps we should, as those three committees, given that many of the social cluster members are across the different committees, maybe we should all go to that region in order to conclude some of our resolutions. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Member Bartman. I think we'll just have to check with the department whether the K9 unit has actually been launched in Mossel Bay yet. If my understanding is correct, they said they were busy setting up a K9 unit and providing training in Mossel Bay, but Mr. Matthews will check with the department to see whether it is up and running, and if it is, we could possibly look at combining it with those visits. Member Kama?
No, thanks, Chair. I agree with you on that, but there's a different thing that I wanted clarity on, Chair. Because I've been receiving calls around the issue of, I think there are public meetings that the Liquor Authority is having. I don't know if the procedural officer is aware. Was the clarity I wanted to get is there was a confusion from some of the trade liquor license holders as to, is this a public participation process towards a changing of the regulations or briefings on regulations that would have been changed in terms of the application process. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Matthews, do you know if there are any public hearings happening from the Liquor Authority with regards to changing of legislation?
I'm not 100% sure, Chairperson, but I'll check with the department and the Liquor Authority and get the details to the members if there are indeed public hearings. I think once, this might just be submissions. If it is taking place, it would be to the Liquor Authority, but whatever legislative changes will still come through to the committee for us to do our part on public hearings. But I will check with the authority.
Okay, Member Kama.
Okay.
That is okay, Member Kama. I'm also just going to put into the chat box for your information on the Western Cape Liquor Authority website. They are busy with public meetings to introduce changes to the automatic renewal process. So it says they're introducing the new license renewal process. So that's what they're doing public participation on, and they're informing people of this new process. So I'm just popping that in there for you to look at as well. So I think that might be what you're referring to. But we will get an official response from them as well. Colleagues, with that, I'd like to say thank you very much to Mr. Wasim Matthews for very ably supporting this committee and for making sure that the committee work continues, even though our chairperson has been promoted to the executive. And I look forward to our next engagement and our first engagement with the new minister, where we can interrogate him on the work that he's done. I think he's done an exceptional job under the circumstances with all of the murders that have taken place since he ascended to the cabinet. So with that, thank you very much to everybody, and a special thanks to the procedural staff, as well as our colleagues in the IT department for making sure that this meeting runs smoothly. Have a very good afternoon and enjoy your Tuesday. The meeting is
Thank you,
adjourned.
Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.